being able to retrieve data from the database. How about creating new data? So to do that, JPA provides the function .save. .save is smart enough to know whether it's supposed to be an insert or it's supposed to be an update. Right? So for instance, if it's a object that you are instantiating, it's a brand new instance that somebody instantiated, right, then save is interpreted as an insert. If instead this is an object that JPA has retrieved from the database, right, and it's now living in memory, it keeps track of all the objects that it has retrieved from the database. It says, this is a managed object. It's an object that you did not instantiate. It's an object that I retrieved from the database. Here it is, user. I just got it from the database. It's a record that exists in the database. If you do a save, if you do a save of that object, right, it's interpreted as an update, right, because it's a record that already exists in the database. I'm not going to insert it again, right? So it keeps track of, and you have to be careful, when you are using this API on what is it going to do? Is it going to insert or is it going to update? Again, it depends, right? If it's an instance that was retrieved from the database, it's interpreted as an update. Otherwise, it's always an insert, right? If it's an object that is retrieved from the database, it's an update. Otherwise, it's always an insert. All right, so let's create a user. So what we could do here is create here in the controller, do here a public user, create user, and it's going to receive here maybe the username, the first name and last name. Okay, so let's do that. Let's in the get mapping here, we're going to do a create, and we're going to pass in a username, password, first and last. Okay, and we're going to parse them all here. So I'm just going to copy some of these. And this is username, password, and a couple more. So this is first, last, first name, and last name. So I have everything I need, and I can create a new instance. And because I'm going to create this new instance, it's going to be interpreted as an insert, right? So I'm going to say user, new user, and I'm going to set user dot set first name, user dot set last name, user dot, I should have created a constructor that takes all the arguments, set username with a username, and finally user dot set last name to last name. Not last name, sorry. Set password with the password. There we go. So now we can use the repository dot save user. That's going to be an insert, and it returns the actual object that was inserted in the database, including the ID, right, which we don't know the ID. Right, we only know the ID after it has been inserted. So we can just return the user. We can just return the user, which will have the ID. So let's try it out. So here, let's do a create here. So create, and we said that it's going to be the username. So it'll be username will be Charlie. The password will be something. The first name will be Charlie, and last name is Brown, Charlie Brown. And we'll do that. And notice that it returns for us the new instance of Charlie Brown inserted in there. We can go into the database and we do a query, and we'll see that Charlie Brown is indeed been inserted into the database, right? The other case would be if we want to update a user. So let's do an update. So an update, this would be maybe an update. So update user, update user. So for instance, typically we want to know, presumably this is a record that already exists. Right? So maybe you want to tell me the ID of the object that you want to manipulate, and maybe the new username, new password. Maybe we'll just change the maybe we'll change just a couple things. Maybe we'll change the first name and last name. How's that? Right. So here we have first and then user ID, and this is an integer ID. We're not going to change the password. Okay. So we're going to take the user ID of a record that already exists, and we're going to change the first name and last name. Right. So we're not going to instantiate the user. Instead, we're going to go fetch the user from the database. Right. So we're going to say user. We're going to do the repository dot find by ID. I have the ID. It's the ID here, and that returns an optional. Right. I'm going to be lazy here. I'm not going to check if it's null. I'm going to be naive. I'm just going to do a get. Right. So obviously, if that's null, this would get an exception, but that's fine. There's my user, and I'm going to change the first name and last name, and then I'm going to save it back. Right. There's the save the save into there. Right. So so let's try that. Update. Let's restart. So let's change Charlie's name. So that's the ID is 4. Let's run that. And so we could say here something like update. The ID is 4. And I'm going to change the first name. I'm going to keep it the same. And it'll be Charlie Garcia. So notice that it changed, right? If we go into the database and we do a query again, notice that indeed has been changed in the database. Right? Yes? Of course, yeah. We'll talk about that next week. We'll talk about none of these are RESTful services. I'm just using get as a means of quickly coming up with examples. Yep. Yeah. So there you go. So we can create, we can update. We haven't deleted, but delete is pretty simple as well. Let's do that one real quick. If we are deleting, it'll be something similar like this, and we can say get mapping delete the user ID, and we can retrieve we can just use the username, the ID, and we can just say repository. There's a delete by ID, and we can pass in that ID, right? And after we delete, maybe what we could do is just return all the users. Maybe return a list of all the users, of all the surviving users. Right, we can say return the repository dot find all, and we're going to cast it to list user after having removed. So let's try that out. So for instance, if we want to remove, let's see, who would we remove here? Dan Brown. We can say delete 3. And notice that it returns all the surviving users, right? Just have Alice, Bob, and Charlie, A, B, C.